Boker Tov, everyone. It's a real pleasure to start this lecture day. As you know, the lecture day is hosted by the German government, so if it's by the German government, we have to start in time. And the head of the mission of the Federal Republic of Germany, Ms. Monika Iwersen, Mrs. Gabriele Ramani, my partner of organizing the workshop, Mr. David Leffler, Director General of the Ministry of the Protection of Environment, Mr. Adnan Boutieri from Jordan. We are really glad that you are with us today. Professor Franz Bayerlein from Germany, Scott Weidenauer from the USA, Dr. Leo Zwart from the Netherlands, and Thomas Kumenacker from Germany, our respected guest from abroad. It's a real pleasure and honor to have such a full hall. That's what I wrote yesterday. We had to stop registration 2 weeks ago, but meanwhile the hall is half empty. I hope people will come soon. The issue of the climate change attracts such a lot of people here. It's a new issue that we are trying to advance, and we'll start immediately with an opening film done by Eyal and Tal Bartov. Please.
The world's most important bird flight paths runs above the Middle East. The migratory birds remind us that we must think in global dimensions, especially in regard to the environment and conservation. Environmental protection and nature conservation promotes peace and connects people across borders. I am particularly pleased that our two countries are cooperating for better climate protection and biodiversity. Germany and Israel have common interests in environmental protection and conservation. The Earth's temperature has been steadily rising for decades. How does global warming affect bird life? Are the effects of global warming on bird migration around the world already evident? Studies currently being carried out in various countries are striving to collect conclusive evidence concerning the effects of climate change on the world's bird population. This includes rising sea levels and flooded breeding ground, swaths of land drying up, changes in the composition of ocean life, in migration times and routes, and in food availability along these routes. A higher than usual surface water temperature was recorded in the Gulf of Maine in 2012. The effects of this change were quick to come.
Climate change is affecting puffins and their forage fish supplies in the Gulf of Maine. It's a subtle process. As the ocean warms, it's less productive. And as increasing precipitation dilutes the oceans, it's also less productive for Atlantic herring and for white hake, their two principal forage fish, which are moving to deeper water and further north as the oceans warm.
The higher temperature resulted in a shortage of sufficiently small fingerlings on which puffin chicks feed. In previous years, 77% of the chicks safely left their nests. In 2012, in the Gulf of Maine's largest puffin colony, the chick survivability plummeted to 31%, and the 2013 nesting season was even worse, at only 10%. Extensive human intervention during the 2014 nesting season saved and strengthened the puffin population by relocating nests from flood risk areas to safer nesting islands, and by supplementing fish species with fish of every size. At the end of 2014, Chief Scientist for the National Audubon Society, Gary Langham, published the results of 40 years of research. According to Langham, as a result of habitats drying up in North America, by the middle of this century, half of the bird species will be forced to migrate from their natural breeding grounds, and their populations will decrease radically. Many species will face extinction, while others will compete with resident species for habitats that are foreign to them. This will result in a decrease of approximately 50% in the number of birds in North America.
Migratory birds are unique in that they are an important component of ecosystems, but they are seasonal component. The seasonal schedule of one species of migratory bird is affecting more than one ecosystem, at least three: the ecosystem in which it breeds, the ecosystem in which it winters, and at least one, usually two ecosystems where it stops over during its migratory route. It is very important to understand better the function of migratory birds in ecosystems and their functions, even their ecosystem services, as they may change due to the change in the schedule of migratory birds through climate change. And therefore it is also interesting to meticulously monitor the effect of climate change on migratory birds. And this will enable us to see the whole picture of the effect of climate change on ecosystems and their functions.
Is it possible that global warming affected body size of animals, particularly birds? And many animals, including mammals, birds, reptiles, and so forth, have changed their body size during the last decades. It is not very clear if it is due to direct effect of global warming or something else. It is very difficult to say what is the main factor which makes them to change their body size.
The scope of climate change effects on migration is not yet clear, but initial observations and studies are already indicating changes in migration routes and destinations. Some species are forced to extend their migration range to distant breeding grounds, while others are finding it difficult to find stopover sites along their migration routes to feed, rest, and refuel.
I'm Leo Snots from the Netherlands. I spent each year some months in Africa, in the Sahel, the dusty world just south of the Sahara, where many 100 millions of birds breeding in Europe and in Asia spend the northern winter. The reason to go there is to answer the question. And the question is, why are so many of these birds wintering there are in decline?
Today, most researchers agree that human intervention is needed to help bird populations in their breeding grounds and stopover sites along migration routes and in wintering grounds.
First of all, we know very little about the effect of climate change on bird migration. It's critical to fund research that will give us more tools to recommend what to do in the future. Nevertheless, we know that keeping the ecological corridors, free areas that will conserve and preserve the arrival and feeding of the birds that come in through this region will definitely secure their capabilities of keep on flying. If they are not able to keep on flying, they will probably get extinct.
Every autumn, 5 billion birds leave their breeding grounds in the Palearctic ecozone and make their way to Africa. 500 million of them cross Israel's narrow airspace. Here, in the diverse habitats, open areas and nature reserves, they rest and refuel before continuing their journey. In the spring, most of them take the same route on their way back north. Studies are likely to take many more years, but preservation of the stopover sites along the migration routes must become a global priority today. A concerted global effort to conserve feeding grounds and stopover sites along Israel's coast, in the fields and open spaces, will support the migrating birds and provide the time necessary to carry out long-term studies.
In the name of Professor Yossi Klefter, the president of Tel Aviv University, I apologize because we moved to the Air Force building and we left the campus. He had an important meeting at 9 o'clock, so he asked me to give a short greetings by the video.
Good morning. On behalf of Tel Aviv University, I'm pleased to welcome you to this very timely workshop. Climate change is of urgent concern to scientists and environmentalists, yet there are many more unknowns than knowns. The topic requires multidisciplinary research to understand its effect in general and on the wildlife and birds in particular. Fortunately, at Tel Aviv University, which is the largest and most comprehensive university in Israel, we are dedicated to multidisciplinary research and study of all aspects of the environment. In addition, we are eager to work with regional and international partners to enhance and deepen our contribution to this field. We very much appreciate that the government of Germany, under the leadership of Angela Merkel, views climate changes as an issue of great international importance. I would like to thank Ambassador Andreas Michaelis and the scientific attaché Gabriel Hermani, who have generously supported and sponsored this workshop and chose Tel Aviv University to be its home. 3 years ago, I was privileged to confer an honorary doctorate upon Chancellor Merkel, and this workshop is kind of another step to reinforce the connection between our university and Germany. Interestingly, it's very interesting to note that in her past role as Minister of the Environment, Chancellor Merkel funded bird research that was led by our own Professor Yossi Leshem, the tireless Yossi Leshem, together with Professor Peter Berthold of the Max Planck Institute. Since then, we all know that Yossi has put bird migration on the map here in Israel and has also put Tel Aviv University and Israel in general on the global map. Thank you, Yossi, for your tremendous work, tremendous energy that brought together here experts on climate change from Germany, Holland, United States, Jordan, and of course Israel. Thank you all the distinguished participants here for your commitment to the natural world, and I wish you a productive workshop and many, many cooperation that will stem out of it. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Professor Yossi Klafter, and I want now to invite to the stage Ms. Monica Iversen, Gabriel Armani, Mr. David Leffler, Professor Uriel Safriel, and Adnan Dugayev from Jordan. Ms. Armani will introduce Ms. Monica Iversen, please.
Good morning, Boker Tov. I'm very happy that you all find your way to this auditorium, and I have to say that we are very happy that we do this workshop together with scientists from Tel Aviv University, and especially I would like to thank Yossi. Climate talks we do worldwide. The Foreign Ministry gives money to initiate these kind of climate talks with the guest land where we're in, and it's the first climate talk in Israel, and we would hope that this is the first of a series of climate talks in Israel. So the Mrs. Monica Iversen is since August in Israel. She's the deputy head of mission and also the head of the political section. Her stations before were Istanbul, La Paz in Bolivia, New York, and Algeria. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Mrs. Netanyahu, dear Mr. Leffler, dear Professor Leshem, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here today in front of such a high-ranking group of scientists and a large audience of interested participants and guests. It is truly encouraging to see so many of you to discuss here the effects and challenges of climate change. This experts conference is another example for the close cooperation between our two countries as Germany and Israel are getting ready to celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations next year. First of all, I would like to thank you, Professor Leshem, for your dedicated work. We very much appreciate holding the German-Israeli climate talks under your professional, creative, and enthusiastic management and guidance. I'm fully aware that you and your research about cranes have a lot of friends and admirers in Germany. You probably know that one of those admirers is Chancellor Angela Merkel, who, while in Israel just lately, asked the ambassador about you and your work on these fascinating birds. Birds have long been seen as indicators of our environmental change and climate change. I understand that quite a few scientific studies have looked at the effects of climate change on birds and bird migration worldwide. One particular concern is, for example, that some bird populations are abandoning migration altogether. Cranes are starting to spend the winter in Germany, for example, rather than fly south, which means that a single severe and harsh winter could decimate entire populations. You just saw Federal Environment Minister Barbara Hendricks in the introductory video clip. Last week she welcomed the outcome of the International Species Conservation Conference in Quito, Ecuador, where important decisions were taken. One of them was the fight against the poisoning of migratory birds. The parties adopted a resolution in favor of banning the use of lead shot within the next 3 years. Such a ban is already in force in Denmark and the Netherlands, and other countries now wish to follow suit. As you know, lead poisoning is one of the leading causes of death in a number of bird species. The action plan for migratory African Eurasian birds was also adopted in Quito. This serves to protect the numerous migratory songbird species of these regions during migration and during the summer and winter roosting periods. These include the nightingale, the oriole, and many other Old World warbler. African range states are expected to further strengthen their efforts for protecting these species, which already benefit from a rather good system of protection in Europe. And furthermore, the conference in Quito decided to establish an international task force on the illegal killing, taking, and trading of migratory birds in the Mediterranean region. Around the world, more and more scientists today, and not just scientists, societies and people in general, see climate protection measures as a mainstream issue. It's no longer just for specialists. And there's a good reason for that. The fifth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has reminded us once again that unchecked climate change is much more expensive than transitioning to a low-carbon economy, a process which has been initiated by the German government. What is needed are investments and innovations to pave the way to such sustainable low-carbon economies and lifestyles. Reducing greenhouse gases remains crucial in this context. All stakeholders now recognize emissions trading as a key element of European climate policy. The European Union has successfully taken cost-effective climate action through emissions trading within a large group of countries with different economic structures. For us in Germany, emission trading is one of the key instruments for reaching our own national ambitions with regard to climate protection targets and for establishing the right framework for the so-called Energiewende, our major national project to transform our entire energy system, basing it entirely on renewable energy sources in the long term. Since 1990, we were able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by more than 20%. We are aware of our responsibility and believe that even greater reductions are necessary. This will be a challenge, no doubt. To reach the 2 degrees Celsius target, we intend to reduce our national greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2020 and by 55% by 2030. This will not be easy, but we are committed to it. From a global perspective, however, our efforts are just a drop in the ocean. Therefore, we want to share our experience and offer our support for launching local initiatives by means of our International Climate Initiative. The goal is to assist other countries to exchange experience with them and to coordinate climate action efforts and to have climate action take place at all levels of administration or society in a country. Let me finish on a personal and certainly entirely unscientific note. I grew up in the north of Germany, in the land of Schleswig-Holstein, on the coast of the North Sea. So bird migration, especially of seabirds or also storks, for example, was a very familiar and beautiful sight every spring and autumn. The natural park Wattenmeer, Wadden Sea, or also Tidal Flats, I think it is called, provides one of the largest natural reserves for birds and migrant birds in Europe. Up north, the climate change concerns for the future are rising sea levels, more frequent, stronger storms, and much heavier rains, which could also affect the habitat for birds and seabirds, and migrant birds, of course. So I'm well aware how important study and connected research in all of these areas you are discussing here today are on a global scale, if we want to preserve nature and biodiversity as part of a healthy ecosystem for all species, for ourselves, and in particular for future generations. I wish you a successful workshop with many new insights and hopefully also new and fruitful contacts and exchanges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would now like to introduce to you David Leffler. He is the Director General of the Ministry of Environmental Protection since August last year. I learned that he is he's going to promote the major projects of this ministry, like the recycling revolution, the establishment of waste treatment systems in minority communities in the south of Israel, the recruitment of minorities and ultra-Orthodox into national service relating to the environment, and raising environmental awareness and raising awareness of the connection between environmental justice and social justice. Mr. David Leffler.
Thank you. Good morning, esteemed guests, researchers, Professor Yossi Leshem, Ms. Monica Iversen, Deputy Head of Mission and German Embassy, Professor Franz Bayerlein, Head of Institute for Bird Migration in Germany, Ms. Gabrielle Hermani, Scientific Attaché in the German Embassy, our guest from Jordan, Mr. Adnan Bujeri, and our partners, Professor Alpert and Sternberg from the Tel Aviv University, Professor Safriel from Hebrew University. Good morning, everyone. I am honored to welcome you to the German-Israeli meeting on the effect of climate change on bird and bird migration. It is a privilege for Israel to host such an esteemed panel of world-leading scientists and policymakers in this meeting. The extreme effect of humans on Earth's climate is now beyond all doubt. The last 3 decades were successively the warmest of 160 years, and carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere has reached 400 parts per million, the highest levels found on Earth in millions of years. All around the world, we witness increasing rate of climate-related disasters, droughts, and extreme temperature events. The Ministry of Environmental Protection established a research center of a few universities, and some of the professors sit here with us, on adaptation to climate change. The effects of climate change have severe impact on humans, ecological systems, and wildlife alike. Changing climate reduces productivity of natural systems, leads to desertification, and causes changes in the distribution of species around the world. Climate change is one of the major threats to biodiversity, and migratory species are among the most sensitive to these changes. Bird migration is a miraculous natural phenomenon, fascinating and inspiring people from the beginning of time. The phenomenon of bird migration has been explored as early as the times of Aristotle in ancient Greece. However, the effects of climate change impose severe threats on migratory birds. Ecological integrity of areas along migratory path has been reduced by droughts and extreme temperatures. Climate causes changes in the timing of migration onset, leading to mismatch with the time of prey availability and therefore reduction in reproductive success. Israel is a global biodiversity hotspot, as was mentioned in the film you just saw, and a key migratory flyway. 500 million birds fly through Israel every year during their fall or spring migration. About 300 species of birds are passing through Israel on the way from Eurasia to Africa and back, and additional 200 bird species are nesting here. At the same time, more than 50 of the Israeli bird species are endangered, and I understand this will be one of the main topics of this conference. Biodiversity conservation is a top priority of the Israeli Ministry of Environmental Protection. Israel is committed to the International Convention for Biological Diversity and is a party of the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species. Migrating species are at the same time the most endangered species and the most challenging to conserve. Conservation of migratory birds requires a close interdisciplinary collaboration of multiple partners from government, academia, and NGOs across borders. Birds migration is also a major parameter when we consider most wanted renewable energy such as wind power. And this dilemma between renewable energy and bird migration is a dilemma that we face in our everyday life in the ministry. The topic you will be discussing today is a great challenge, but also a great opportunity for collaboration with our neighbors in Jordan and the West Bank, and with all our allies from European and African countries. This is an opportunity to develop close working relationships with our neighbors towards a common goal and to promote peace in the Middle East. Let's all pray. I hope that the knowledge we will gain in this meeting will inform us about the best approaches to conserve migration species and to protect the wonderful phenomenon of migration itself. I wish you all a fruitful meeting and an enjoyable time in Israel.
Thank you, David Leffler. The General Director of the Ministry of Environment. And I'm really privileged now to invite my friend Adnan Bougeri, who is the ecologist of Amman Center for Peace and Development. Please, Adnan, we plan to have with us General Mansour Abu Rashid. As you know, last month we celebrated 20 years of the peace treaty with Jordan. On the left side, you can see the peace treaty with President Clinton and Prime Minister Rabin and His Majesty King Hussein. Unfortunately, there was a meeting today with the Prime Minister of Jordan, and General Mansour Abu Rashid couldn't do it, but he was leading with us a huge project to protect the environment with barn owls, and we succeeded through the barn owls to get people together. So I believe now the peace in the Middle East is not with the dove, but with the barn owls. Please, Adnan.
Thank you, Yossi. Can you hear me? Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. And as Yossi said, that I'm here on behalf of General Mansour Abu Rashid, who's the chairman of the ACPD. We have been working together with Yossi. Yossi mentioned the peace treaty. With Yossi, we were the unknown soldiers, the people who were not officially on TV, who met together in 94, 95, at the signature of the, and discussed about environment and nature conservation. We have been working for the last 20 years on first projects on migratory birds, such as the project called Birds No Boundaries. So the second project was working with Yossi and colleagues from the Palestinian territories, was on the biological control or ecological control of pests in the Jordan Valley, which included setting up boxes for owls and kestrels to encourage them to occupy these boxes and breed in the valley. Up to date, we have around 200 boxes, which are very successful in attracting owls to come back to the valley and breed. I want to come from here as an entrance towards the importance of climate change and its impact on birds and biodiversity. We have seen that in the northern Jordan Valley, 90% of the boxes were occupied by owls. In the middle Jordan Valley, in the Jordanian side, we had about 40% of the boxes occupied. In the southern, which is close to the Dead Sea, zero occupation and nesting. This is a good indicator for us that it's not yet the climate change, it's the ecological ecosystem. In the north, it's more humid, better conditions for rodents and other pests, which means that it encouraged the owls to come and occupy and feed on the rodents. In the middle, the less and less climatological conditions happened. And this gives us how birds can be good indicators for any change in the climate or the ecosystem. And I think where we have to have cooperation is first of all because we all believe in peace. We live in the same region. We are under the same environmental conditions. And any change in terms of pollution or climate change will affect us all. It will affect our livelihood, the agricultural, the economy, the tourism, and all aspects of life. Again, I want to say my good friend from the Ministry of Environment mentioned that it is well known that there is more than 500 million birds that pass through the Rift Valley, which we are blessed with such migration, Jordan and Israel. The birds have to pass in a corridor, ecological corridor of 7 kilometers width sometimes, and any impact that we do is going to affect these birds. And then this puts on us a global liability, let's say, to protect these birds, because these birds, they migrate from the breeding sites in Europe, Eastern and Western Central Europe, going down to Africa. And this is the main reason why we need to cooperate, in addition to the need to have peace in our region and cooperation between the people. So I'm not going to speak for long, but I'm looking forward, and ACPD is looking forward to have very good cooperation on this issue and to try to at least set up a small piece of protection and conservation of ecosystems in our region. Thank you very much.
And even the situation is so complicated with the peace treaty, we are still continuing to work with Jordan on our project with the barn house, and I'm really happy that Adnan made it to come here. And the last but not least is Professor Uriel Safriel, who will briefly tell us now what are the aim of the workshop. And I apologize again with the problems here at the break. I hope we'll solve it. Please, Professor Uriel Safriel.
Thank you, Yossi. As we all know, climate is variable and unpredictable, and so is the loudspeaker. So therefore, to be safe, I stay here and not use the loudspeaker, but use just my vocal cords.
Yossi, let me call for you.
There is a translation. Okay.
Well, what can I do? Okay, so I'm glad to open this German-Israeli climate talks on what you see there, on the effect of climate change on birds and on bird migration. Well, as we have heard, climate change is now on the world's agenda, even in Israel. And just last week, we here in Israel were exposed to the local expression of the projected global climate change, of increased frequency of intensity and frequency of extreme events. And this should bring home, of course, the need to mitigate the impacts of such events on our societies. And this is through investing in what we now call climate change adaptation. But given this, I think that many people of the public that are not here, but just all over us in this city and the center of Israel and everywhere else, when they see this title behind me, they will raise an eyebrow because they will say, why should we care about birds suddenly? Why don't we instead invest in the real things, like in climate change hazards like coastal erosion, floods, droughts? So why suddenly birds? So here I come indeed to the objectives of this conference. The first objective is to raise awareness at all levels of our societies, both in Israel and in Germany, to a likely scenario in which, on top of the direct effect of climate change on people, there will be also indirect threats on people through the direct effects of climate change on nature, on the nature of our countries. And this is true both for Israel and for Germany. Now, we're sitting in this auditorium, and there is no nature here at all. But our life depends on nature. And this is something that is not in the awareness of our public and our policymakers in many cases. So in more technical terms, our life depends on ecosystems and on their biological diversity. And birds simply comprise a very significant component of this biological diversity. So now the question is, okay, birds are a component of biological diversity, but why specifically migratory birds? And the answer is that we people critically benefit from ecosystems of Israel, and this much depends on the interactions and the functions of all the living components that comprise the biodiversity of the Israeli ecosystems, and this is the same thing about the German ecosystems. But migratory birds are unique in this context, that though they are only seasonal component of ecosystems, each migratory bird comprises a component of biodiversity of at least 3 geographically distant ecosystems. The one in which they breed, the one in which they winter, and 1 or 2 in which they stop over. So if, for example, there is a shift of the timing of migration that is driven by climate change, this would constitute a significant ecosystem change, not just in one ecosystem, but in at least 3 or more ecosystems, with the repercussions of all these changes that reach humans in large number of ecosystems the world over. Now, our knowledge on these changes and their effect on people are currently very scant. And here I come to the second objective of this conference, which is to encourage scientists and their supporters to attend this research area of the effect of climate change on nature, and specifically on the component of nature that are migratory birds, more intensively and more extensively than it is given now. So for this, surely Israel and Germany Israel, that is a world-renowned migration route, and also it extends over a very narrow but very steep climatic change, climatic gradient, and also Germany, that is a world pioneer of the research of bird migration. Both of them coming together is a winning combination. So let us start now this conference and see how this combination works. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Uriel Safriel from the Hebrew University. Thank you, our respected greeters. Please back to your seats.